3, 2, 1.
What's up, freak bitches?
I know, right? Cool. Well, we're live, and thank you for coming back. So I'm sure a lot of people that will watch this or are watching this know that you were my first episode, and I'm stoked that you're back to talk about astrology. I know some people were actually anticipating this. So I'm stoked to be talking about it. So thank you for coming back for the second episode on the Ashley Rothstein podcast.
Yeah, of course. Let's do this. Let's learn me some stars, learn you some stars. We're going to go all over the stars tonight.
Heck yes. So basically, all I really know right now with astrology is that I am Scorpio because of my birthday, and basically that I have trust issues and I'm feisty as shit. That's what I know. My husband is Cancer, and apparently we're a really good match because, you know, certain websites tell me that. And that's the extent of what I know of astrology. So when looking at this, oh, hold on. I want to make sure. Oh, never mind. When preparing for this episode, I did a bunch of research, and it was crazy because you find, like, this is with anything, but you find like one video or website that's like, astrology is not a science, blah, 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 like all this stuff debunking it. Then you find another website and other videos, a couple of them I found very fascinating, with like all of these psychologists and statisticians and scientists that have done peer-reviewed studies to prove astrologies exist. So I'm like, you know, with anything, I'm just like, what is true? So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. And I just wanted to preface it for people that are currently tuning in or will tune in to watch this, that, you know, Matt is not necessarily an astrology expert. He doesn't really plan to do this for hire or anything, but this is one of his passions. He does a lot of research on it. He loves it. Him and I have actually had some discussions about it before. So this is going to be two people, one being me that doesn't really know anything, and then another person that does know a lot about it, just kind of having an open conversation about what astrology really is, the science, the history, and just everything about that. So with that being said, the first thing I wanted to get started on is, what the heck is astrology and how is it different from astronomy, which, what I understand, is basically the study of the bodies in the sky, like the planets and the stars, their properties in a more scientific, objective way, if you will.
Yeah, you've kind of nailed the planet on the head there. Well, I'm full of really bad puns today. So astronomy and astrology, they were one and the same roughly about 2000 BC. So we're talking about like 4,000 years ago. That's several generations ago, and it's still being practiced today, but they were one and the same. People like Plato and Socrates and Sir Isaac Newton and other famous people and scientists back in the days actually looked into it, saw the research, etc. But it has drifted apart a little bit. So the big difference is astrology is the study of how the celestial bodies impact you and like what effects they have on your life. Whereas astronomy is a study of the celestial bodies for their physical properties and the nature that can be observed, measured, scientifically proven, etc. So they're both talking about the same thing. We're both talking about the stars. We're both talking about the planets. One is like, what is the influence that it has on us? And the other one is, what can we actually observe and learn from the universe? So that's kind of how I would simply put it.
Wow. Okay. And so who invented astrology?
So we actually don't really know that for a fact. A lot of people credit the Babylonians in 2000 BC. There's some mixed evidence that the Sumerians invented it in around 3000 BC. But then you have other parts of the world that probably never talked to each other, like in India and in different parts of Asia, and obviously Egypt and the Mayans. They all had their own form of astrology, and it was several thousands of years ago. So it could be that everyone kind of picked up their own pieces of it. As man, of course, we always like to look up to the stars to try to find our purpose in this universe, you know. But at least the astrology that we're going to talk about today, which is Western astrology, and to a certain degree Eastern astrology, which we'll touch towards the end, is going to be based off of kind of like the Babylonians, and that was followed by the Greeks. And after that, it's kind of migrated over to the West. So that's kind of where that's at. It's a little bit of a mix of everything.
So astrology was then, from what I've read, like you were just saying, it basically, it it began because people were trying to make sense of the world around them, right? They were trying to find answers, trying to find ways to predict the future or find patterns. And so they started to first look up to the sky, right? Look up to the stars and develop, I guess, patterns in the sky, right? And constellations, is that where it is thought to be like the first, I guess, occurrences of it? That's where like the root of it started in that practice?
Kind of. So the constellations were kind of assigned, and I'll get to that in a second here, but to lay kind of like the groundwork, and it's something that we all forget living in the city. Like if you go camping, you go up to the mountains, you get away from the light pollution out there. There are so many stars speckled across the sky. And if you've spent enough time out there, you're going to start to be able to recognize what a planet looks like, and what does Mars look like? What does Jupiter look like, et cetera. And you can see it with your naked eye as long as you're able to like learn it and pick it up. So the, I guess the ancient people, they would look up at the stars. The stars would be kind of in the same place. They wouldn't really move except for, you know, the natural rotations of the seasons, but they would see these other bodies that would just like move across the sky while the stars would stay fixed, and those would be the planets. So there's been a lot of development around in those cultures that the planets had some rulership. Even the Greeks assigned different gods to them, like Saturn was ruled by Kronos, for example. And that's how they started assigning meaning to it. And like the Mayans, for example, like I just went to Mexico last year, or a couple months ago, 2018. And the Mayans actually did a heavy worship of Venus and the sun. All their pyramids were lined up for the equinoxes of the year, et cetera. There's a lot of finding meaning in the stars that reflects back down to us. And it's something that's happened all around the world. And I think it would make sense for us to actually, like today, as a society today, 2,000 years past the birth of Christ or whatever, it's still relevant today. And it's something that we should really not forget, just because we don't see the stars in the sky all the time. That kind of answers that.
Well, that's powerful. I don't look up enough. I don't look up nearly enough. And it's crazy. I was actually thinking today, I was walking upstairs in my bedroom, and then the sun was setting a certain way where the light looked almost pink, right? And I was walking through, and I was like, it stopped me in my tracks because it was something new. It was something different than the norm. And I was looking and just in awe at the sunset, like it had that pink tinge. And I'm like, this is actually very sad, because what makes me look at the sunset right now? It's just that it's something different. Like, why am I not looking at the sunset every single day? Or why am I not looking up every single day? Why am I not looking? It's so amazing and so beautiful, but we get busy. And we go and go and go in our lives, and we don't do it nearly enough. And I feel like there's so much power and so much that can be found in looking at something that, you know, is so much bigger than us. Mm-hmm. I was actually in Arnold's at my uncle's cabin, and it was during the meteor shower. I don't know what meteor shower. You know how every so often there's like, you know, there's all this stuff that comes out like, oh, meteor shower, go see it. Yep. And you know, there was little to no light pollution there because we were up in the mountains, and oh my gosh, the sky was amazing. The stars were amazing. And it was just a moment I will tangibly remember forever, of just looking up and actually having wonder, almost like a child, of like, wow, this is here every single second. It's here, but we just don't, at least myself, I don't realize it. And so it's so powerful what you just said, of just remembering to look up. So the constellations, it's hard because, you know, you said that it's the early roots of it we don't really know, but with the constellations and how they were named or developed, I mean, how does that date back in regards to records? I mean, was there certain groups of people people think that we're just looking up and said, this looks like a crab, or this looks like the Big Dipper or the Little Dipper? Like, who named these and why, and just that process?
Yeah, so we don't know exactly why. We know that the Babylonians kind of came up with the initial naming. We're not sure exactly how the names came up, but they tend to relate to the energies, which I'll get into a little bit later. But the Greeks actually refined this a little bit. So right now, in Western astrology, the sun is in Aquarius right now. We're in Aquarius season. So if you have a birthday coming up, or you just had a birthday, you're probably in Aquarius. And Aquarius, as according to the Greeks, and the way you draw it out in the sky, is actually a water bearer. So they assigned this sign the water bearer because during this time of the season, you would expect a lot of showers and your crops would get a lot of water. And this is kind of like the basis for some of the signs that have been assigned, but we don't know exactly how all the other signs were assigned. And really in the sky, it's kind of arbitrary how they've drawn the constellations, because if you were just to look at the straight up lines and not even look like what it's supposed to represent, you like probably wouldn't even be able to see it. So it uses a little bit of imagination, but there is a little bit of method to the madness. And I have to kind of backtrack a little bit with an analogy that you're gonna have to like sit in your seat for and buckle up. Okay.
I'm ready.
We have to keep in mind, knowing what we know now, that we are these intelligent animals on this big rock in outer space. Okay. And on this big rock in outer space, our planet, we fly around at over 1,000 miles per hour around this big ball of fire called the sun. Okay. 1,000 miles per hour. Right now, this second, you and I are flying through the air. We don't feel it because it's at a constant velocity. It's not accelerating, but we're flying around that fast. Okay. This ball of fire, the sun, also a star, has other rocks flying around it at several thousand miles per hour as well, and some gases and all that stuff. Now, this ball of fire, our sun, okay, is part of a galaxy, the Milky Way. And this galaxy has hundreds of billions, like 200-300 billion stars or other balls of fire that are in it as well. And all of these balls of fire and the sun and everything is flying around the center of this galaxy, which has a supermassive black hole. And this supermassive black hole, we don't know exactly what will happen to us. It's so powerful, it sucks light up. You may have heard that there's nothing faster than the speed of light. Yeah, light can't even escape a black hole. And our ball of fire is flying around this black hole in the center of the galaxy, okay, along with other stars out there. And these stars have planets. Now get this, our Milky Way is not unique. There are about 200-300 billion more supermassive black hole galaxies like our own that also have a bunch of balls of fire, hundreds of billions of balls of fire flying around it. And with all of this, we don't know where the universe ends. We think it started from a concept of the Big Bang, right? So when you kind of think about the Big Bang, the entire universe came down to an infinitesimally small point, right? And it exploded, and that's what we have. We know from physics that the universe is expanding at a constant rate. There's things like dark energy and dark matter that we don't quite understand. We still don't understand black holes. And so I always like to lead in with this because I don't think that the ancient people were wrong for trying to find meaning in the stars. I don't even think that we understand the meaning of the stars at this point. All we have is observation, and that's kind of like what astronomy does. Astronomy is like, I observe that there's these many planets and stars and black holes. Astrology is like, what is the meaning of all this, and how does it affect us on a day-to-day life? Now, with that being said, you're still buckled in here and you haven't fallen out of your seat.
You just made me feel very small.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a perspective we have to have, right? Like there's so much more out there and we don't even see the stars every night because of light pollution. So
yeah, well, and really quick, I felt like it totally aligned with something that I saw. So in the videos that I was watching about astrology, there's a lot of stuff like, oh, astrology isn't a science and you can't prove it. There's stuff out there. But then if you think about it, no science can really prove what the hell we're doing here. And that's why I feel like there could be so much meaning in this, because we're all trying to figure out answers. We're all trying to find purpose. We're all trying to figure shit out. And like you said, I think that there is definitely some weight in the ancient wisdom of trying to figure stuff out by looking up.
Yep, totally. And the thing that I've come to a conclusion with, and I've been looking into and studying astrology for about like the last 10 years now. And I've always been trying to reconcile this scientific portion of it with the metaphysical portion of it. And the conclusion that I've come to over the last couple of years is that you can't. And they're really two different things. It's a very dualistic thing. It's very much like yin yang. So from the yang aspect, you're only going to be able to see and observe and predict things that you can actually touch or measure, right? And from the yin aspect, you can't really touch it. It's something you have to experience. And we're really looking at astrology and astronomy as two sides of the same coin. And when we start to view it as that, I think we can make bigger leaps and bounds and understand our place in the universe and actually physically understand it and see it. But what needs to happen is that these need to integrate. And right now, you have a lot of scientists whom I respect. I have a science background, engineering. who have these blinders on because they cannot fathom that there might be meaning out there in the stars. Like I've seen a lot of interviews with scientists who are like, oh, that's bullshit. Your star sign doesn't mean anything to you. It's like, but you don't even know why we're here. All you do is measure stuff with the telescope and do math equations. Like there could be something there. And that's where astrology kind of comes in. And it's that dualistic nature that we really need to marry. And I think that's a good approach to take. Just take both of them.
Yeah, because you just said it. You have a science background, and like you, I like to measure things that are here sometimes, right? It's like you like to have a fact in front of you that makes sense, that you can see, that's tangible, that's logic. You can or can't disprove it. There's black or white, it's yes or no. But there is also the side of life of like, what if, like the bigger picture. And if you've taken any sort of psychedelic, for example, you can't question that there's something bigger. So I really like what you said of just using this as a tool to almost say what if. But what's interesting, and we'll get into this, is there are some studies done on astrology that actually prove it to some degree. So it's nice to have that balance. And I just think with people that are very close-minded of like, no, this doesn't mean anything, that's bullshit. It's like everything can mean something. Astrology, let's just say even if you find a horoscope that's just written by some bullshit source, and we'll talk about this, but what if that makes the person in the morning that's maybe a little bit depressed, what if that helps them get out of bed because their horoscope says something good for that day, that they're going to have some amazing shift or some amazing perspective or meet somebody new? What if that encourages somebody that wouldn't have otherwise gotten out of bed to get out of bed and then manifest some positivity from simply reading that? The placebo effect is just as good, if not better, than factual things that make sense, so there's something here for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely something there. And really what we're starting to see, along with everyone being connected and sharing ideas, is that our consciousness creates a reality. And this is a concept that we're starting to learn, and a lot of people are getting turned on to. And I know it sounds a little woo-woo, but if your consciousness is being affected by reading something positive like that, and it creates a better reality for you, that's great. But we'll get into the whole horoscope thing, right? Like there's also a way to get accurate horoscope. The stuff in Cosmo, like you don't read that stuff. Like, I don't know if you want to jump into that now. We could probably jump to that, but, or save it for later, but.
No, I want to hear about it. I think it's a nice, it's a nice natural bridge into that, because that's been my concern with astrology is like, like I basically started this whole episode out with, it was like, I know I'm a Scorpio. I know that because I read it somewhere, because my birthday. And then I understand, from all these different sources that I'm a certain type of personality, or like I'm going to have this day today, or I'm going to have, this type of month, or I'm going to get this new job, and all this stuff that I'm like, who the hell is writing this? Like who is writing this? Like, I cannot imagine that there are actual legit professional astrologers sitting there on behalf of Cosmopolitan and writing out these like well thought out and studied horoscopes. So that's been my reservation with astrology of, I'm like, where can I find like a reputable reading or a reputable source that actually knows what the fuck they're talking about?
I'm glad you asked, because the way I see horoscopes on tabloids, on apps, if you don't have it personalized for you and it's just a general one, like you go and flip to the Scorpio section, like it's really at best a fortune cookie, and at worst, I think it damages the potential that astrology has to show to the world. Because when people who don't really know a lot about astrology and they read these things, and there's been studies that show like you can make up a fake horoscope for somebody and they'll read it and they'll be like, oh yeah, like that totally resonates with me. They're like, nope, it was actually for a different sign, The problem with that is, and it's more for entertainment value, because astrologers will go in and write those horoscopes for your sun sign, and your sun sign is a sign that you all know. If you don't know, it's called your sun sign. It's the sun sign. So your sun sign is Scorpio. But the reality is we have about 11 placements, 10 planets, and a rising sign that are going to determine our multifaceted personality and the way that we interact with the world and the things that happen to us and the way that we perceive the world. And the fact that they're reducing all of these 11 placements, and they go up to almost 20 counting other aspects, but let's just keep it simple down to 11. And no, that's like, wow, we'll simplify it to 3 later. But to oversimplify that and say, you know what, screw your other 10 major placements. I'm just going to give you kind of a horoscope on your one placement. Have at it, enjoy. And it's just, it totally makes it kind of tarnishes the reputation of astrology, because that stuff is bogus. Like, if you're already looking into that and you kind of feel like it helps you out a lot, continue to read it. I'm not saying stop reading it, but really start to question that you're not going to be getting the full perspective of that. Now, if you want a full natal chart reading, you can do them online for free. They're not going to be as in depth, but you'll learn a little bit about like where your Mercury is, where your Mars is, where your moon is. And each of these planets is going to have a different sign usually. It's all dictated by the time of your birth. So when you're born, whatever constellation those planets are in, from the perspective of the Earth, it's going to imprint you with the energies of the cosmos at that time. So if you're a Scorpio, and I didn't check your Mercury, but say your Mercury is in Aquarius, like you can have a Scorpio nature, but your Mercury will be in Aquarius, which dictates your intellect and your communication.
So real quick
yeah.
to back you up, just so I understand. So the zodiac signs or the readings that you see, like, check your horoscope for today. Is that really a part of astrology? Because then you started talking about the natal chart. So the two, I'm trying to find is there a separation between the two? Like, is one bogus and one actual astrology, or can one, like the horoscopes, be done in a legit way and some people in a bogus way? Like, what is the difference between those two?
So they're all kind of legitimate, but it's a varying degree of legitimate. So the Cosmo tabloid type ones, they're so overgeneralized because they don't have your full picture of all the planets in from the time of your birth, because they've got to make it general for everybody else. So what they do is they reduce all of your placements with respect to the placements today and give you a really generalized reading that sounds like a fortune cookie. Now, there may be a sliver of degree of truth there, but it's never going to match up with you. Now, you can go see a professional astrologer. They'll do your natal chart. Your natal chart is when you were born. So it's the energies of when you were born. And they'll tell you where all your placements are and all the things you got to watch out for and the gotchas. And they can do a legitimate horoscope for you that is actually tailored to match every single one of those planets and the placements and the exact degrees they were in the solar system, and tell you about how your past was and how your future was. Whereas the tabloids, like, well, let me overgeneralize for a Scorpio and I have no idea where her planets are. And so that's why, like, I kind of have beef with the whole like Cosmo tabloid type things. It's just not going to give you anything of substance, really. It's entertainment value at best, I feel.
Well, it must just come down to finding a source, because like you just said, I think they actually did a study on this where they gave many people a horoscope for like that day or that month or something, and they all read it. I don't know how many people there were, but they all read it and they're like, yes, this is me. And then they had them pass their horoscope to their partner, and they realized that everybody had the same.
It was the same one, yeah.
It was the same exact one. So it's like, okay, yes, like I like, there's so many times where like I read my horoscope and I'm like, yes, like they know me. This is me. But then I don't even read other ones. So I'm curious to start now looking at like horoscopes for other signs. And like, I wonder if I will relate to that, and that's why I think it's so important to find a reputable source for information. Like, I watched this video, I think I sent it to you, where there was this lady that was like an astrologist life coach. And she started doing this was like a Vice thing. And then she started doing this reading with this guy, and she started out the reading. I was laughing because she started out the reading and she was like, so is there an unresolved problem in your life right now? And I'm like, really? Like, every single person has an unresolved problem in their life. And then he was like, yeah, commitment. And she was like, oh yeah, I sensed that.
Yeah, I cringed when I saw that.
And I was just like, come on, like, and but at the same time, people, she is not like every single person out there. So like, my point of this whole thing is finding the right source of information. And perhaps we can talk later about how to do that. So now going into you started to talk about it, and this is really interesting. So you said you can get your natal chart read. And then you started talking about the 3 different signs. See, I was only familiar until I started talking to you of my one sign, which I believe is the sun sign, which is Scorpio. because that's just, I think, all that people really talk about, or like what's kind of mainstream. So if you want to talk about the 3 different signs and what they mean, how people can figure them out and their significance.
Yeah, let me, before I jump into that, I just want to do a closing point to what you just said. So when you go get a professional reading, we can talk more about it at the end. The horoscope that was providing that example where the audience was switching papers, it was too general. I've actually had a few readings done for me that calculate like with my exact time of birth and everything that said from ages 18 to 19, this happened to you. At ages 21 to 22, this happened to you. Ages this and this and this. And every single one of it was extremely accurate. The one that haunts me to this day was, and I got this after this age range, but said from 18 to 19 years old, you had a severe falling out with friends and you kind of went into exile and you went on your own and you stopped, you just kind of redesigned your life. And that's exactly what happened when I was 18 to 19 years old. And I never even met this person. I submitted it online and a professional did it and then mailed it to me. So there's definitely a lot of value that you can get from getting a professional one done, but you've got to pay for it. You can't do it out of an online tool. Like really spend the money, find somebody that you think is reputable and then you can trust and do it. But now leading into kind of like your question. So everyone's aware of their zodiac sign. And when we don't say what kind of sign it is, everyone's defaulting to the sun sign. So what that means is at the time of your birth, looking from planet Earth to the sun, the stars that were behind the sun were going to be in Scorpio. And so the concept is the light that filters in from the stars through the sun influences your behavior, and you take on the traits of Scorpio, which is a water sign.
So then Scorpio, is that a constellation?
Yeah, so we'll touch on this a little bit towards the end. So Western astrology has kind of differed a little bit into where, due to the precession of the Earth, it's changed into an area of space, and it's considered a zodiac. So Scorpio is a constellation, but the area of space that you got the Scorpion energy from is a zodiac. And I know that's kind of confusing, but I might be able to explain that a little bit later. It's a lot to digest.
Yeah, so I'm trying to understand. So then the day that I was born, or the moment that I was born, the sun sign is the area of space that was behind the sun.
Yep.
On the day that I was born.
Yeah. So I've got like a coaster here. So if the sun's like in the middle right here, and say the Earth is down here, and you're looking at the sun from the Earth right here. So I draw a line and I keep drawing that line. The stars back here would be the ones in Scorpio, adjusted for Western astrology. But that's basically the concept. And the whole concept applies like for your moon sign. Looking from the Earth to the moon, the area of space behind the moon tells you what sign you are, and it filters through the moon to give you the qualities that you have.
So that's the moon sign. So then it's the same concept like we just talked about with the sun, but then the moment I was born, the space that was behind the moon is my moon sign.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And your moon sign is in Virgo.
My moon sign is in Virgo. And then so we can get a very basic understanding of first, before we kind of dive into what the signs mean, the rising sign. What is that?
Okay, so the rising sign is unlike the other 10 planets. And by the way, when astrologers say planets and they call the sun a planet or moon a planet, it's just nomenclature. It's not that they're ignorant and they think it's like the moon is actually a planet or the sun's a planet. But so aside from like the 10 planets, we have what's called a rising sign. And this is arguably one of the most important things you need to figure out to understand your entire life chart and everything that's going to go into it. The rising sign is where the sun was on the eastern horizon at the minute that you were born. And there's 12 signs of the zodiac and 24 hours a day. So every 2 hours, it's switching signs. It's not like your sun sign, like you have a 30-day window to be a Scorpio. You know what I mean? Like it's literally, you got less than 2 hours. And even within those 2 hours, astrologers really need to know what degree. So each sign has 30 degrees of movement. So like every few minutes, your rising sign is going to change a degree. So your rising sign is really going to add, it causes you to figure out where your houses are, and houses are kind of kind of like an advanced topic that I don't want to kind of confuse anyone with, but your houses key you into the areas of life that you're going to be affected in rather than just the qualities that you're getting.
Okay. So you said the Eastern hemisphere. I'm just trying to get
Eastern
a picture
horizon.
That's for rising. So the day that I was
sun
born,
rising.
So the day I was born, or the moment I was born, the minute I was born, where what about the Eastern Hemisphere? Like where the sun was? I'm trying to visualize.
No, so the eastern horizon. So if you look towards the east, the sun rises in the east, right?
Yes.
So the area in the sky the sun was when you were born is going to determine your rising sign. And it's offset. So it's offset from when you were born, right? So if you were born kind of like at 6 a.m., I'm kind of guesstimating because it obviously changes a little bit. You'd be a Scorpio rising, but you're not a Scorpio rising.
I see.
So
I was born in the afternoon,
yeah.
so I was born at 3:18. So it's where I was born and the moment I was born, where the sun or the Eastern Hemisphere or where the sun was, or like the horizon. I'm just trying to like visualize that.
Yeah, so kind of in that example where I was like, if you draw a line from the Earth to the sun and behind the sun, those stars give you that sign. It's kind of like if you were to draw a line from Earth at the point that you were born to where the sun is at, and that angle is going to give you your rising sign.
Okay, that makes sense because I'm a math brain, so the angle makes sense to me. Okay, I see.
Yeah.
And then because the sun is rising and moving throughout the day, depending on the moment that you were born, that angle will change.
Yep.
And like you said, every 2 hours it's changing. So I can see that now. Okay, so we have our sun sign, which is the space behind the sun the day that you were born. That space would be your sun sign. So Scorpio for me. The moon sign, the space behind the moon the day that you were born, that's your moon sign. And then the angle to which the sun was rising based on the time that you were born, on the day that you were born, would be your rising sign. And that's
Looking
changing every 2 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So now that we have the 3 signs, explain what they mean.
Okay, cool. So before we get into the actual signs, in astrology, every planet has a different purpose, and it imparts different energies into your life and your personality. And so the day that you were born, you take these imprints from all these planets at once, and you're walking, living, breathing, experiencing human of that imprint of that time. So
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Matt, real quick.
Yeah.
I was told that we have a question on chat, and I just want to see. Do you see it?
Nope. Just read it out to me.
I don't see it either. And I want to make these interactive and have people be able to ask questions. And I'm going to put a test message and let me know if you see it. I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but
yeah, I see your test message, but I think it's only between us. It looks like because it says group chat.
I wonder if choose links. Huh. Let's see. I don't want to spend too much time, but I would hate to miss a question from somebody that's tuning in.
Maybe can they ping it to you on Instagram or something? We can get it there.
Yeah. So whoever asked the question, I would love. I still got to figure out this chat. I don't know why I can't see it. Maybe if I go into live events real quick, live control room. Let's see, 701. That's when I started this. Oh, my mom, trusty mom, she sent me this. Have you ever studied or have any info about how astrology ties into religion and different religions? I've always been intrigued as to how it may be tied in, but I have no idea. Haha. So maybe you can feel free to address that now, or we can address it later, but that was the question.
Yeah, let's just do it real quick. So I don't know a lot about the modern religions having a tie-in, but the Mayans especially, they use astrology a lot, not their own form of astrology. I don't think that they use the constellations as we know it, but they had temples that were worshiping Venus. They had temples that worshiped the sun and the equinoxes, Chichen Itza, which was the picture that you used. I went to there. And also the Egyptians. The Egyptians really ingrained it in their culture, using the positions of the stars in the sky for their religion. And I'm not too keen on what their religion was, but there's definitely a lot of tie-ins. And then I don't know if this is more of a religious thing or not, but I know in India, There's Vedic astrology, which is a tie-in with sidereal astrology that kind of combines life purpose and teaching, but I'm not sure if it has a heavy religious connection there. But yeah, there are some integrations, but in terms of like Christianity and stuff like that, Judaism, like I don't know of any tie-ins right now.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for addressing that. And I'm gonna,
Thanks for the question.
I don't know why the chat doesn't work on my end, but I think my mom will probably, send me any more questions that we have so we can use her because she's tuning in. So awesome. So back to what we were saying with the whole sign. So I'm sorry, I didn't hear you when you started because I got distracted. So we defined the 3 different signs and what they are. And now we're kind of going into their significance.
Yeah. So these 3 signs, just to kind of clarify, is I'm kind of giving you the Tim Ferriss approach here. If you guys are Tim Ferriss fans, these are like the 20% that gets you 80% of the way here. It's gonna be the 3 things that you're gonna need to know that's gonna transform the way that you look at astrology, so you don't feel overwhelmed like you have to look into a bunch of other stuff. Because one of my qualms with the internet and researching is like, you want to read something about your sign and somebody's written like 10 pages about cutting a lime on a Tuesday during a full moon. It's like, dude, like I don't want to know that much info. Like just tell me like what I'm about, But in terms of the 3 signs, so your sun sign is going to be your actions and how people see you in this world. So it's very much your physical body, and it's very yang expression. And your moon sign is going to be your internal monologue, your feelings and your emotions and how you respond to the world. And so just knowing your sun sign, you're automatically like right off the bat cutting at least 50% off of who you are. And that's kind of like my huge beef with the tabloid astrology stuff, because they can't make it for everybody's moon sign. Like they're just going to give you the general sun sign thing. And in fact, I would almost bargain that having a horoscope just based on moon sign, if they had to pick moon versus sun, you'd actually know how you're going to feel that day rather than what's going to happen to you. But because astrology is very popularized around the sun sign, and we don't even call it sun sign, we just call it our zodiac sign, all the tabloids are based off of that. So that's sun and moon. The last one is the rising sign, which is obviously seeing the sun rise in the eastern hemisphere. That is kind of like your spirit. And the easiest way to describe it, because that kind of sounds a little like murky, is the 2-minute first impression somebody gets off of you. It's the kind of the energy or your default persona that you're not thinking about, and how you give that off to the world. So really, you're kind of if we were to reduce all your signs to those 3 signs, you're a walking expression and combination of all 3 of those things. So for you, Ashley, you have a Scorpio sun, a Virgo moon, and an Aries rising. So your Scorpio sun makes your actions and who you are a very deep and intense person, and you can kind of feel with your body. And your Virgo moon is very analytical, critical, always trying to get things perfect. You can try to feel like a perfectionist. And your rising sign is an Aries, and Aries is the type of sign that just wants to like punch through and do stuff and like just fuck it, let's just do it, let's run forward and make shit happen. And when you combine all of those perspectives together, you get a better insight on who you are as a person rather than, oh, I'm just Scorpio. And I think they say this about me, So that's kind of like the 3 signs that you want to look up. So what I would recommend, you can do it for free. Go online. We can probably put some links in after this show, I'm assuming, and type in your birthday. You need your exact birth time. I really need to stress that, and place and location of it. If you don't have that, it's going to skew your rising sign. So try your best. Try not to guess. If you can get your hands on a birth certificate, it's going to be worth it. And you can calculate these 3 signs that you have.
Very cool. So just so I understand correctly, so the sun sign is how the external world would view you based on like overall. So let's just say like your coworkers over time, your friends over time, your family over time, how the external world kind of sees you and your behaviors and your patterns. And then your moon sign is your internal dialogue. So how you operate on the inside and your thoughts and just like the nature of your internal environment. And then your rising sign would be if someone saw you for 2 minutes, the energy that you would bring forth as your first impression. So like you said, your spirit, it's what you're naturally going to give off, the vibes that you're going to give off. Is that correct?
You got it. You're an expert already. Look at you.
Wow. Look at me. Look at me. This is so cool. And it makes me think about, like you said, we just operate off of like, I'm Scorpio and this is what I am. And this is all I am, but you are missing a lot of pieces if you don't have the other 2. And I wonder why. Do you know why we are just so focused on like the sun sign, like where that transition happened. I mean, obviously the other signs exist. So I don't like, why did that transition happen?
You know, that's a good question. I never really gave it a lot of thought. I would say just to popularize it and generalize it, somebody arbitrarily picked the sun sign. I know in ancient Greece, they would actually give more weight to the moon sign. And if you were born at night, when somebody asked you what your sign was, you wouldn't give them your sun sign. You give them your moon sign. And they were a lot more aware of what it is. But I think really in our distracted world, it's a lot of complexity that you have to go through. And there's a lot of really, really good astrologers out there, professionals that have just blown my mind. But the way they explain things, it's like they're giving like a, you know, postgraduate like dissertation. Like nobody's got time to read that or try to understand it. And there's not really that middle entry ground to help people understand what all these other aspects are. So yeah, I don't know. It's a good question, but that's what I like about astrology. That's what I think needs to change. That's why I don't like horoscopes, because your horoscope that you read on a tabloid is not going to take into account the other signs. And we're only talking 3, by the way. You've got a total of 11 at least that are significant. The other ones are derived from those. But just with those 3, like we got to be talking about those 3, and we got to have the conversation about those 3.
For sure. So even rewinding back to the 12 signs, do you know where they originated from? Like I'm trying to envision back. Are these sort of passed along over time? Is this kind of like an ancient wisdom thing that was assumed, or was there like a time and place where someone said this is Scorpio, this is Aries, and defined that? Like where did that come from?
So that came back when astrology was invented around 2000, 3000 BC, so 4 or 5,000 years ago. And the one thing that I wasn't able to get to was when I was giving you kind of like that whole, like we're spinning around a ball of fire and this ball of fire is spinning around a black hole and all these black holes and blah, blah, blah. If you've ever seen a model of the solar system, like in school, like growing up elementary school or wherever you've seen it, no judgment if you only saw the solar system when you were in college. But if you think of like a plate, right? Like a dinner plate, let's say, all the planets in the sun are actually revolving on that surface. Like they're not doing this and then like doing that or anything. Like they're all like on this flat surface, and that's everything revolving around the sun. And what that is called is the ecliptic plane. So where the sun and all the planets would travel among, there would be a strip of stars that would go around basically that ecliptic plane. And so the astrological signs were derived from those set of stars in that strip that goes around the Earth. So it's not just like, let me point up there. That looks like, you know, a frog or something. We don't have a frog, by the way. That looks like a cat or whatever. It's like, no, like just from this strip, let's determine these 12 energy placements. And they ended up giving them names, and we don't know specifically how all the names were derived. And obviously the shapes don't quite match when you look at it, but the energy is very much there. And like I said, like the Aquarius example, the water bearer was for this time of the year because the sun would be in that space when it would rain a lot at that time.
So I didn't even know that, the ecliptic plane. So I was assuming that the planets are going like this, and I didn't even know there was such thing as the ecliptic plane. So then what I'm envisioning when you said that is there's like this disc almost, right? Like this, like a hockey puck in a way, and it's being split like a pizza. And like then you like into 12 pieces, right? And then you have the 12 different pieces that each symbolize one of the signs, like Scorpio and Aries, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
And we're at the very center of the pizza. You know where they give you that little thing that kind of looks like a table in the middle of your delivery? That's the Earth right there. So all of astrology is derived from that center of that pizza box, looking out to the crust of the pizza and seeing where the planets and stars are at the crust. So that's how we derive all our signs.
You just got to give me some pizza analogies and then I understand.
Oh man, now we can talk the same language.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so wow, my mind is like, so maybe this is a good segue into going into the elements. Is that good? Because I still don't really know a lot of these concepts, and I don't know if I'm kind of like jumping over certain things that are important, because we now kind of identified the 3 different signs and what they mean and their significance. Is it a good time to transition into understanding the elements?
Yeah, I would say so. I think we've covered a lot of basics here. So yeah, so with regards to the element, so a lot of people don't actually realize this, but the zodiac, each sign has an element to it. So Scorpio is a water. I'm a Leo, so that's a fire sign. So the four elements are fire, earth, air, and water. Those are pretty easy to remember, and this is why I like to start with this. So fire signs have very outgoing passion. They have a lot of conviction in what they're doing. An earth sign is very stable and grounded, somebody you can always depend on, will only do something if it actually makes sense to them. An air sign is very intellectual, and they're also very communicative. They're the most communicative of all. And a water sign is somebody who's really, really in tune and in touch with their emotions, not like in an overly emotional way necessarily, but in a way that they can command power and really understand who they are and how everyone relates to them on an emotional basis. So when you know the elements, it's a really fun game, and you can probably take this away from the podcast if you're listening here. When you meet up with your friends, knowing these definitions, and you can look up further definitions online, try to categorize them in a bucket of an element. Okay. Don't think about Scorpio. Don't think about Aries. Don't think about any of that. If they had a prominent energy that they were giving off, what element would it be? And then find out what their sun sign is. Nobody really knows what their moon sign is anyways, but you're going to get off their actions, probably their element. So ask them and start playing this little game and see if you're getting it right. And this is actually kind of what turned me on to astrology, is because like I actually really disliked astrology back when I was like studying engineering. Like, this is BS. Like, I don't believe in it, blah, blah, blah. I've opened my mind since then, obviously. But I started playing this little game where I was like, okay, like, fine, there's elements. So this guy better be a fire sign. This guy better be an air sign, whatever, right? And I was like, holy crap, like, it's actually like working. Like, I'm getting these guesses right. What's going on? And that kind of started the whole spiral of me getting into astrology. So if you memorize the elements, you'll be able to get better in tune with astrology, kind of as an intro. And then each element has 3 signs. And the 3 signs are broken down by modality. So we'll slow down here a little bit. There's a cardinal sign, a fixed sign, and a mutable sign. So each element has one of those 3. So it's really 4 times 3 is 12.
So to rewind, wow, that's a tongue twister. To rewind real quick. That was really challenging for me in my head right there. So to rewind, is there a certain maybe placement in space? What makes like the 3 signs of fire, what makes them a fire sign? How is that chosen, or how is that identified?
So the order is kind of set in stone. It's not clear how the order was set. So the order goes fire, earth, air, and water, and it repeats all the way until the end, until you get to the 12 signs. Fire, earth, air, water, fire, earth, air, water, fire, earth, air, water. But Western astrology is very heavily based on the season. So at the start of every season, let's say spring, which is the first zodiac sign, you're going to have Aries. Aries is a cardinal sign. At the start of summer, you're going to have Cancer, a cardinal sign. At the start of fall, you're going to have Libra, a cardinal sign. And at the start of winter, you're going to have Capricorn, a cardinal sign. So they're very much tied into the season. So you've got this like switching of the elements, and you've got different type of elements starting a new season, if that kind of makes sense.
I see. So that does make it more clear, because I was thinking they were in buckets, like all the water, all the fire, like in order. So like the first 3 signs of the year, all water, for example. So then it's skipping. That's the best way I could say it. It's skipping. So it's like turns. A pattern.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So is there a first? So if we're envisioning now the first 3 signs, or I guess the first 3 signs of the year. So then what you were starting to go into that, right? Next.
Yeah. So that's a great segue. So the first 3 signs of the year are Aries of the astrological year, which starts in the spring, by the way. That's the start of the astrological new year. It's going to be Aries, Taurus, and Gemini. So that's a fire sign, Aries. Taurus is an earth sign, and Gemini is an air sign. So because the season started with Aries, Aries is a cardinal fire sign, and we started with fire. And the middle of a season, or the middle of spring, is always going to be a fixed sign. The same thing with the middle of any season, it's going to be a fixed sign. This is Taurus, fixed earth. And then the last sign of the season, kind of breaking up the juju and trying to get ready for a new season, will be a mutable sign. So in this case, it's going to be Gemini, mutable air. So really, If you take away the signs of what their name is, we start with cardinal fire in spring, we move on to fixed earth, and then we end with mutable air. So that's why it's important to kind of understand the elements, because you can start to identify that in other people around you. And it's kind of a good start to get your feet wet in astrology.
So basically what's happening throughout the astrological year is you're having cardinal fixed in that was mutable.
Mutable. Yep.
So you have cardinal fixed, mutable, cardinal fixed, mutable, constantly, like that's the pattern. And then for the elements, you have fire, earth, air, water, fire, earth, air, water, fire, earth, air, water.
Yep. It goes like that until it ends.
Okay. I see.
There's a pattern to all of it.
So then I would be cardinal fixed, mutable. So 1, 2, 3. Is that hard to do? I was just curious, but if it's like too hard to figure out, then I don't.
You're gonna have to count all the way to up to 8.
Yeah,
for you.
I know. I don't really. That's too much brain power for me. I've had a long
fixed
day.
Water. Scorpio's fixed water right there, and your moon sign is a mutable earth sign.
I'm fixed water. So what is fit? So then now, since I'm fixed water, I already heard that I already knew I was water because I'm so fucking emotional. It makes really good sense. So that's no question. We don't even have to go into that. But fixed. So now the cardinal, fixed, mutable. What do those signify?
So let me start by explaining all 3 types of water signs: cardinal water, fixed water, and mutable water, to kind of get your perspective here.
Oh, so this would be perfect because I think my husband's a water. He's Cancer.
Oh yeah. Okay, perfect. All right.
Cool. So go for it. And wait, which one is he? Is he mutable or is he
cardinal water is Cancer?
He is cardinal water. All right. This is getting juicy. All right. Cool.
Taking notes and receipts.
Go for it.
So the cardinal water is going to be like that ocean wave that hits you as you're standing trying to catch a wave on your surfboard, like, and it just kind of like tumbles you. Or it's also that wave that can bring you into the shore and make you have a good time. It's cardinal is very much about new, like creating new things or having new energy or injecting new things into existence. And he does it in a water way, or people with this placement, cardinal water, do it in a water way. So in an emotional way, they hit you with new things and perspectives and ideas like that. And it's very much experiencing in your emotions. Fixed water, on the other hand, which is you as Scorpio, is going to be like an iceberg. And this iceberg, you only see a little bit of the surface, but the iceberg runs like super, super deep and super, super wide. And it's like ice cold, and nobody's going to like move you or melt you that easily. You go to the depths of your inner feelings and how you feel and relate to other people. And you go so far deep, you go deeper than anybody else can and is willing to, and you derive great power from that. And the last one is mutable water, which is Pisces. And mutable is kind of like go with the flow.
Hey, this is awesome. This is my brother, because he's watching. This is like me, my brother, and my husband. It's like all of us. We're just so fucking emotional bunch. Wow. Okay. So sorry to interrupt. I just had to say
that's why you guys get along. Most of the time, at least. So, and then mutable water is a Pisces. It's very much like go with the flow. It's kind of like, and this kind of seems creepy, but Pisces get it. Kind of like floating out in the middle of a still ocean, and kind of the waves are kind of taking you. You're just kind of like floating on your back, and you're like, if a wave comes, it pushes me. If I hit an iceberg, I'll just kind of melt it. Like just kind of going with the flow and the vibe of everyone else around there, and relating your emotions and their emotions back and forth. So that's kind of like the cardinal, fixed, mutable. And you can take all of those analogies and do it for all the other elements too. Like fire has its own set of analogies. Like if you want, I can go into fire. You have any questions about the water stuff I just said?
No, I love it. And I'm probably like partially one of these people that's like, oh my gosh, that's so us right now, right? Just kind of like giving into that. But the way you describe the 3 different personalities are just like so us, me, my husband, and my brother. It just makes sense. So I'm like kind of like, whoa, it's like kind of tripping me out a little bit. But no, I'd love to hear about fire.
Yeah, that's exactly like how I got into astrology. Is like, why does this make so much sense right now? And that's when I like started getting into it. But so fire, like, and we don't have to do all of them unless you want to. But so for fire,
I do. I think people would be interested, because then that kind of gives it's like an own little like personal reading, if you will, because then people listening right now can hear their own little sign. So I'd love to hear about it too.
Cool. Let's make it a lesson then. All right. And it's a good lesson to have, because when you stop thinking about the actual sign names and you really just think about the elements and modalities, it kind of explains everything. You don't need to remember what the sign is. You'll learn it eventually if you look into it enough. But so for fire signs, you're going to have a cardinal fire, a fixed fire, and a mutable fire. You see a pattern here? All we did was switch the water for fire. And so cardinal fire is Aries. So it's the cardinal energy in general for any element, like I mentioned, is going to be like punching new things into reality. Like in the water example, it was a wave that was hitting you. In the fire example, it's like somebody sparking a new flame or lighting off a firework. It's that new, like from nothing to something. It's creating new fire, new passion and expression in a new direction. Fixed fire, which is Leo, I'm a Leo sun sign, is that huge bonfire at the beach. And it's that everyone gets around it. That bonfire is not really going anywhere, but it's been there for a long time. It's been providing warmth. It's kind of the center of attention. Leos like to be center of attention sometimes. And it's just providing that heat, you know. And then mutable fire is going to be Sagittarius. So Sagittarius is very much like, you know what, like, let's spread this fire out. Like, let's light everything up in fire. And ironically, which is really, really interesting, aside from this last fire season, but the few fire seasons before that in California, a lot of the forest fires have happened during Sagittarius season, which is Sagittarius is all about lighting everything else up. So it's kind of like, it's tragic, of course, the losses of the fires, but it kind of makes you go like, okay, like that's kind of weird coincidence. But yeah, so that's kind of like the pattern, and you just take the elements and you do it for cardinal, fixed, and mutable.
Very cool. Wow. I don't know this stuff. It's like we talked about in the beginning. I have such a science mind, and I'm like, show me the facts of like who started this and who wrote these out and who identified and who made up these elements and who made this. But you know, at the same time, it's like, do we necessarily need that for every single thing? Because we don't have the answer for every single thing. Like every single thing doesn't need to be science-based. And you have these people that are like, astrology's, you know, a load of shit because you can't prove it. But I mean, like I was saying earlier, like it can be, it's fun too, you know, and you see patterns and it makes sense. And if something makes sense, it's like, why not look into it? Why not think about it? Why not question it? I think a really good scientist is open-minded and can that's what probably a good transition when I watched about Carl Jung, when he was trying to, like, you know, disprove astrology, very skeptical in the beginning, but he always kept a very open mind. I feel like he kind of rode the line between science and facts, and then also keeping an open mind to like the bigger picture. And I feel like that's a really good balance to have. And he's one of the earliest people, right? One of the earliest psychologists. I don't know if no, I don't think he was a statistician, that started to really study this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually have a couple quotes that I thought might come in handy. So here's something about him. So Jung argued that so many people had devoted so much time to thinking about such things that it must make up for a portion of the collective conscious and was worth studying. So that's how he got into it. And I think that's a really important point that a lot of scientists don't have, right? If a lot of people are talking about something, but it doesn't agree with your frame of reference, like, does that mean you should dismiss it? And I think what Carl did was say, you know what, there's something here. There has to be something here, whether it's a placebo effect or not. And it's in the collective consciousness. And we know, like, as a society kind of moving into consciousness creates reality, that, you know, just enough people believing in something makes it even that much more true. And I know that sounds kind of not very scientific, but I don't think a lot of these things can be scientifically proven. And yeah, there's another quote here. So this man also asked Carl Jung if he believed in astrology because he had mentioned it, but Carl said, "It is not necessary to believe in such concepts. He simply observes that they are sometimes relevant." And I think that's a really healthy way to look at it, look at astrology as a whole, or metaphysics, or any type of practice that has yet to be proven by science. If something's relevant, if something's like personally resonating with you, if something's making a lot of sense, like, look into it, keep going until it stops making sense. Like, keep chasing, like going down the unbeaten path, because there might be something there waiting for you. And you can always turn around when you want and go back to the fork in the road.
I think it comes down to having a balance and an open mind, because like anything, you can go too far with something. Like, there are some people that, you know, don't get out of bed until they read their horoscope because their horoscope determines their day. And in my opinion, that's really no way to exist. It's like
Correct.
you need to have a balance, right? You can't be living for these things. But then at the same time, if something is working for you, like you said, why dismiss it if it's outside your realm of understanding? It's almost like a better way to think about it would be like you just read in that quote. It's almost like to put it in its place when it's relevant. Don't let it necessarily rule everything that you're doing, or don't dismiss it entirely. Why be on either end of the spectrum? Why not just put it in its place where it's relevant? That's kind of my stance with what I'm trying to approach a lot of things in life with, is not necessarily because I'm such a black or white kind of person of like all or nothing. Either I 100% believe in it, or it's stupid. That's kind of how I've been living my life. But I'm really trying to find the balance and be in the middle and ride that line between the two and keep an open mind. And I feel like we would all benefit if we kind of took that approach to more things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I like to give this analogy because it's something that's become apparent. I work in tech, so I work around a lot of coders who spend 8+ hours a day talking to a computer, and I don't mean that kind of like tongue in cheek. Like they're literally issuing commands to computers and making them work, right? And a computer is very black and white, right? So these types of guys, they're very brilliant, by the way. Like they're very intelligent, but in that type of factual, touch it, prove it to me type way, right? And so that's kind of like leading a life of a robot, if you kind of think of that. So these guys, they won't do anything unless it makes sense. They won't move jobs. They won't take a leap of faith. They won't fall in love with someone if it doesn't make financial sense or whatever, right? Like there's a lot of things that have to make sense to these people, and it's almost like having a blinder on. And the thing that that always makes me crack up every single time I see them is whenever we go get beers, it's like, I see these coders who are super binary, strict. Like if you were to look at the facts of drinking a beer, let's say, it's bad for your liver, it's bad for your body. Your body treats it like a poison. It has to try to get rid of it. It can give you a headache, a hangover, etc. Why would you drink it? Well, they're really participating in kind of the other side of the coin, which is experiences, right? And I think that's what's missing in science, is that you have to have the experiences to see for yourself what it's all about. And sure, like there's not really anything beneficial on paper for drinking a beverage, let's say, but it could cause you to become more free. It could cause you to express yourself. It could cause you to lose inhibitions. It could cause you to say what's really on your mind when you've been holding it in and bottling up for so long. That makes you feel better. And I think it's really important to note that with all things in life, if you take that approach, look at it from both perspectives. It kind of helps us not fall into the trap of I need evidence for everything. Like sometimes you just need to go freaking do something and see for yourself. And if it resonates with you, great. And if it doesn't, whatever, move on.
Yeah. That was a great example. And I think like in any industry, there's the people, there's a problem that lies when I feel like people pretend like they know what they're doing when they don't. And that's a very lazy way to say that, but it's being mindful with the information you have and how are you sharing that information. It's like the lady that you and I both saw in that video when she's like, calling herself an astrologist life coach. And then she, brings people over and it's like, basically tell me what you want to hear. That is not a good look for astrology. And that is not a good use of the information that she has. So it's like taking this information that's in front of us and having a very mindful, grounded perspective of what it is, where it comes from, and the reality behind it. Like you and I are having this very open conversation about what astrology is. See, there's so many people I feel like that, not just with astrology, but so many other topics, they get so emotional because they highly identify with whatever it is because they believe it to be true so
personally
strongly
identifying
and
with your
so
beliefs.
much with their ideology. And then they're so blinded by anything else, by any other perspective. This could go with like, you can have two ends of the spectrum. You can have the super scientific community that's like, if you can't prove it to me, it doesn't exist. And then you have the spiritual community who's like, we are nothing. Everything is a program. Like, like every single thing. Like I sometimes even like make jokes on my, my Instagram story, for example. And then like, I'll have people that like will comment like, you're making this joke and this is a program. This is societal programming. And I'm just like, I'm just trying to be fucking funny. Like I'm trying to exist in the way that I know how to exist. Like give me a fucking break, you know? So there's like two ends of the spectrum, like you're talking about. And I think it's so important to find a balance, like find your balance. Like everybody should find their balance, because it's not good to be on either side of the spectrum, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
You know?
It's kind of like, and this is not like a slight at anybody who practices religion, because I do very much respect the religious practices, but it takes just as much faith to be an atheist than to be somebody who practices religion. Think about it. An atheist has to assert a certain amount of faith that they believe there's absolutely nothing out there. And a religious person has to assert the same amount of faith to believe that there is something out there. And those two extremes are really the same thing. There really needs to be a balanced approach to it. And that's just an example. That's not me trying to attack religion, but it's something to take into perspective.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to questioning everything and figuring out information and doing research. It's amazing to me. Like you, I don't think there's anything necessarily, how do I want to say this? Nothing really sticks out to me that's outwardly like wrong with religion, for example. Like, you know, if you want to practice your religion, that's fine. But what's so intriguing to me is the amount of people that will practice religion that were just told to do that, and then they don't ever really figure out why they're practicing. It's just something that they were told to do, maybe by their parents or their community, and they don't do the research for themselves as to why. For me, it's all about the why. Do whatever the hell you want to do, but learn about what you're doing, ask yourself about what you're doing, and figure out why the hell you're doing it.
Yep, totally. And like I mentioned in the last podcast, like I haven't eaten meat in 10 years. And I have so much respect for people who have actually like been to a slaughterhouse or seen an animal get killed and they still eat meat. I'm like, dude, like we're bros. Like this is awesome. Like, but I also talk to people and they watch the movie Babe and they're like, oh, I can't eat for like a week. And like, and then they forget about it and go back to eating meat. And this is not really a slight of people eating meat or for that matter. It's just like, what do you guys know why or where this is coming from? And once you know that, make up your mind and make a decision about it.
Yeah. It's mindfulness with life. And like I said, it blows my mind how many people don't. I mean, does it blow my mind? Is that a true statement? I don't know if it blows my mind, because there's so many blinders that we all have on without us even knowing, ignorantly. I actually am going to do a little video about this on my Instagram soon. So this is a little preview for anybody that's watching or whatever. But the other morning, it's an interesting story. The other morning, I woke up early. My husband woke up early too. And, you know, he was like, why don't we go for a walk? Why don't we walk Bear? It was our dog, 30, 45 minutes. Let's have a great start to the day, because we don't usually do that first thing in the morning. We usually walk him in the afternoon. And legit, the thought that came to my mind when he said that was like, I don't think I can go because I haven't hydrated yet. Like straight up, like it was like an actual thought. Like it was an actual thought that almost deterred me from going on this walk with my husband and my dog. And I was able to observe myself in that moment. And I was like, whoa, hold on. Let me back up. You can go on a walk, Ashley. Like you're good. Like you can go on a walk for 30 to 45 minutes in the morning without hydrating. Like back up and let's get into reality here. Cause I was in some fucking la la land when I was thinking that. But I almost let that thought come and be like, you know what? You can't go, stay in bed, and then miss out on that whole opportunity. Like my point here is that I looked at that thought as truth, and I almost didn't question it. And I almost missed out on a great experience, and I almost let that thought carry forward to then happen again potentially in the future. So like I say, it blows my mind how much people don't question things, but at the same time, I understand it, because I do it, we all do it. We have these ignorant blinders on, and it freaks me the hell out because I don't know how much else I'm ignorant to. Like, what else am I doing every single day that I just don't fucking know, that is ridiculous and not serving me?
Yeah,
you know?
we got blinders on our blinders for that matter. And it's just, you have the right frame of mind. Like just having that awareness to see that they exist, you're already like 10 miles ahead of everybody else. Because if you have the observation that you know you have these, like as soon as you start observing them, they're just going to start to self-correct and fix themselves. And I think that's really powerful.
Then I ask myself, why in that moment did I have the ability to take a step back and observe myself and question myself in that moment? What was it that made me able to do that then, why am I not able to do that some other times? Like, what is it? I'm not saying that you have the answer,
yeah.
but what is it? It's like the have you seen the movie Bandersnatch on Netflix?
No, I haven't watched it yet.
Have you heard about it?
Yeah.
It's trippy as fuck, man. It is trippy as fuck, and it's
The
like
Black Mirror one, right?
It's the Black Mirror one, and
Yeah.
you control it. It's interactive, so you control the whole thing. You make the decisions for the character, and the movie goes in different ways based on your decisions. And,
oh no way! Like with your remote?
Yes,
like
you control the character the whole time.
That's so cool.
And I'm not going to spoil it for you, but basically he starts tripping the fuck out because he's like, what is controlling me? Who is controlling me? What is helping me make these decisions? And I was thinking, I'm like, this is a weird metaphor for life and like the voices that we hear in our head and our spirits and the bigger picture of things, like what's controlling us. And it's so trippy. Like I don't even think we made it through. It's hard to tell if you make it through till the end, but I don't even think we made it through because I was getting so tripped out because if you make a certain decision and it was like the wrong decision, it'll like take you back through a different loop and then it like sends you through different scenarios to get to the same point that you were at, but then you have to choose again. So
I see. Yeah.
It's bizarre. So you got to watch it. But we got a little off gear here, but some great dialogue. I love it. I want to get back to some astrology stuff. So I actually we got off on a tangent, which I love tangents, but I kind of forgot where we were at. But I'm looking at my list here in front of me, and some things that I wanted to talk about. Well, I don't know if this is jumping a gun, but you wrote this thing out in your DM to me, and I was like, what the fuck does this mean? You said every planet has an exaltation beyond, in parentheses, beyond really good at this, and then a home, in parentheses, natural, and away, in parentheses, opposite of home and unnatural, and a fall, in parentheses, totally at odds. What the hell does that mean?
So this is a really kind of more, I don't want to say advanced, but it's like kind of next level past the beginner stuff. But each planet, so the moon, the sun, Mercury, Mars, etc., everything has a zodiac sign that it resonates with a lot. And you're considered fortunate, I would say, if you have the zodiac sign that the planet likes to be with in your natal chart or your birth chart. So for the moon, in this example, the moon is home at Cancer. So Cancer is that cardinal water energy. We talked a little bit about it earlier. And the moon likes to feel and behave like that. And so that's the moon's natural state. And it's going to travel through the zodiac and it's going to have to experience different things, even though it wants to experience that cardinal wave, that new feelings and emotions. So whenever the moon is in Cancer, if it's in your natal chart or if it's, in the world today, if the moon is in Cancer, you're going to feel like what it feels like to have a good moon placement. Now an away is going to be the opposite of the home placement. So the opposite of Cancer is Capricorn. It's an earth sign. It's also cardinal, but it's cardinal in a way of like, I don't care about anybody's feelings. I just want to do this and I'm going to make this happen for me. And it's very contrary to the energy of Cancer moon. Like I want to feel in a new way. Capricorns are very like known for getting shit done. Like setting a goal, setting their mind to it, and nothing's going to take them off track and they're going to get it. And it's very much the opposite energy. So when the moon is in Capricorn, you experience less emotion than you're supposed to. And it means that you're not chasing emotions for that matter. So it's kind of like a fall.
So is this for everybody? Away. So when they say like, that's a good transition into like, so when the moon is in Capricorn, does this mean that everybody's experiencing that same feeling or that same like example? So it's for everybody. So it's not just for Capricorn.
And the moon is in Capricorn right now as we speak. So it's less emotional times right now. We're being a little bit more objective. We're looking at the big picture and trying to set our minds on some marks here. That doesn't make it a bad thing. It just means that the moon's energy and full potential is not actually being used in the way that it likes to be used. And it's an uncomfortable feeling to have that, but you may not even notice it. It really takes some tuning in, but if you start to observe the moon cycles, you'll start to see every 2.5 days when the moon switches signs, like how the energy is so distinctly different every single time.
So that makes a little bit more sense. Like sometimes like I'll be talking to people on like Instagram or whatever, and like I'll be talking about like how I feel, and they're like, oh yeah, like you totally feel like that because the moon's in Virgo. And I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, what do you mean the moon is in Virgo and it's because I feel this way? Like, what does that mean? I have no idea. So every planet has this. So why is the moon so significant then?
So the moon is one of the three major signs that you need to know about yourself, right? So we talked about that a little bit because it has the biggest impact. Like it's your inner state, right? So when you were born, just kind of reiterating this because I know it's a lot of information. You're imprinted with the energies of the sky at that time. So your moon, when you were born, was in Virgo. Okay. And so as the moon travels around every single day, every 28 days or whatever it takes for the moon to go around the signs, the moon is going to affect your moon in Virgo in a different way. So that's why kind of like the horoscope tabloid readings don't really make a lot of sense because they don't know what your moon sign is in, or excuse me, your sun sign in that matter. And so having an awareness of where your moon sign is going to tell you, you're able to relate your moon sign placement from birth, which is what you have now, to the energies happening right now. Now for you, because your moon is in Virgo, it is somewhat favorable for the moon to be in Capricorn because they're both earth signs. And these two earth signs kind of gel a little bit. So when you have Earth and the moon, a planet that wants to feel emotions, you know, and experience new ways of feeling emotions, the Earth is like kind of grounding about it. And it's like, no, like let's make sense of this. And Capricorn does the same thing. So you'll find in periods like right now, when the moon is in Capricorn, you can think a little bit more clear, if that makes sense.
Okay. So then the moon, for example, in Capricorn, someone like me, that my sign, the moon sign is in Virgo, I'm going to respond to the moon in Capricorn differently than someone that has a moon sign in Aries.
Yep. Completely different.
So it's all relation.
Mm-hmm. That's why the tabloid horoscopes don't work. They don't have your specific chart. Everyone's chart is completely different. So they got to give you like a washed out generalized version of it.
I see. That's making more sense now. So I was thinking that when the moon is in Capricorn, for example, everybody's feeling like the same thing. And I'm like, that's
to a certain
far-fetched to me.
To a certain extent, like the overall general underlying energy is there, but how it specifically hits you and impacts you is going to be different for everybody else. So in general, like as you go out into the world, as you get out of bed and you go to work or wherever you go outside, everyone's going to kind of have that like underlying temperament. And you can really see it when you start to observe it in everybody.
Interesting. So what the hell is so important about Mercury? Everybody talks about Mercury, and I think we have it on our list to talk about Mercury retrograde. Like, that's another thing that people tell me all the time. Like, if I'm feeling weird, they're like, oh, yeah, of course you do, because Mercury is in retrograde. And I'm just like, what are you people talking about? I don't understand it. So maybe you can explain it to me.
Yeah. I wanted to cover this because everyone talks about it, and I think everyone kind of blows it out of proportion. It is significant, but it's not that bad. So let's talk about what a retrograde is. Let's back off from astrology just for a second. Let's talk about a real phenomenon. It's called a retrograde. And like I said, there's a lot of light pollution. So if you were back in the days before there's a lot of light pollution, you actually saw the planets move across the sky. They're the only star-like looking objects that actually moved across the sky, where the stars just stayed fixed. You'd see the planets kind of moving across, you know, they just move across, and you always expect them to move across. But all of a sudden, you'll see a planet and it'll stop and then turn around and go backwards. Can you imagine as an ancient person, like, what the hell just happened? That thing's supposed to keep going this way. It made a dead stop and turned around. And so from the point of the Earth, because the Earth is not the center of the solar system, which actually doesn't really affect astrology, by the way. It's kind of a false argument. Because the Earth is not the center of the solar system, we all revolve around the sun. That phenomenon happens when another planet laps the Earth, or we lap another planet. So what that means is, like, for example, Mercury is flying past us faster than we're able to fly past it. So when Mercury is traveling at normal kind of path like this, it's behind us because it laps around the sun like 4 times faster than the Earth or whatever. But when Mercury is starting to pass us, it starts to look like it's slowing down. And then eventually it passes us and it looks like it goes backwards. So that's a retrograde. And the reason why I want to explain that is because the retrograde happens to all the planets in the solar system. They just happen on different time scales. Mercury happens to be the most common one that goes retrograde. And so going back to Mercury retrograde. So Mercury is a planet of intellect and communication. So knowing what sign you have in Mercury is going to tell you about your intellect and communication and your style in that matter. And there's other things to it, but just to keep it simple. When Mercury goes retrograde, it's going backwards. So what a retrograde is asking you is to redo stuff, to look into things again, to double check things, to do the inner work and really decide on the inside if this is what you really need to do. And so it gets a lot of bad rap with, technology and communications and emails not going through, and signing contracts is bad, et cetera. And there is, a certain degree to that. All it means is you just need to be a little bit more careful about that. And I know me, like I've experienced things like my computer breaking during that time. And if you think about it, you're like, well, computers don't really have anything to do with intellect communication. No, like actually we all speak computer language. It's called moving our mouse and typing and clicking and opening programs. Like there's a breakdown of communication there, and that's why computers can stop working, your phones can stop working, et cetera, stuff like that. So a Mercury retrograde is just watch out for that stuff. That's all it's saying, and it happens to every single planet.
So the things like, for example, like a Mercury retrograde, with you explaining that, was there, and there may not be an answer for this, was there like who, like how was that determined? Like it makes sense when you say it, like, okay, like I would feel that, but how was that derived? Like, did somebody determine that? Was this again ancient people like seeing this, going backwards and thinking, oh my gosh, this is when we have to take a step back right now and revisit things in our lives?
Yeah, that's kind of how it started. Ancient people had a lot of knowledge about astrology/astronomy. But knowing that actually physically seeing the planet move backwards, they'd be like, okay, like we got to start thinking about what science is passing through again. Now, modern day, we have calculators that can calculate this out to infinity and beyond. Like we know with a certain fact when the next retrograde is going to start, when the next retrograde is going to end, and for every single planet and the exact degrees that they're going to be at. And that's kind of the marvel of modern science. Like my sister was just telling me the other day, she was going through some old stuff in the house and she found a birth chart reading from like the 1970s that my step aunt had or something like that. And it was like literally hand drawn with a ruler and like with I forgot what it's called, like the compass or whatever that you draw perfect circles.
Oh gosh, what is it?
Is it a compass?
Yeah, a compass. A compass.
Yeah, a compass, and like really like doing math on the side and stuff like that. Like people actually had to do that kind of math, but now we just punch it into a calculator to figure it out. So a retrograde, like an eclipse, like anything else, we can actually calculate by knowing where the planets are, which we have knowledge of through telescopes, and knowing the speeds of them, etc.
See, what's cool to me is, or I shouldn't even say what's cool. This is how I personally would want to approach something like this. For me, when people know certain things, my question is like, how much are you actually manifesting because you know it? So it's like, if you know a retrograde is coming and you all of a sudden start feeling all this stuff, how much of it are you just noticing because you know the retrograde is happening, and how much is happening naturally? Where I feel like people could benefit, or where I would personally benefit, this is a personal choice, of like knowing a retrograde is coming, instead of being like some people, like you said, I feel like blow it way out of proportion. They're like, oh my gosh, like I'm just feeling everything. Like I had this one person reach out to me like on Instagram that was like, I feel like my body's like, convulsing, and like I feel like I'm gonna throw up like like all day. Like, do you feel the retrograde? And I'm like, no, I don't. But what I was going to say is something that I feel like could be useful is like, okay, we know a retrograde is coming. We have this ancient wisdom of like people, that first started seeing the planets going backwards and using it as a time of reflect. Let's use this as an intentional time to reflect on our own lives, because our ancestors did that when they first saw the retrograde. So it's almost like, instead of freaking out and being like, oh my God, like everything's happening and I feel the retrograde, and like almost being out of control with it, taking more of a controlled approach of like, this is a time to reflect and dive within and see if what I'm doing is working, and just generally reflect on my life, like bringing that intention instead of almost letting it control you.
That's an excellent observation. You're already becoming an expert. Like, look at you. Like, and the retrogrades do different things for different planets, and they happen all the time. They're natural. And the thing that makes astrology so beautiful is, and you're kind of leading into it too, is like, if you know about these things and you're like, okay, it's planning for a time to reflect, the sign that it goes retrograde in tells you how you're going to reflect or how things are going to happen for you. And that's what I think is really beautiful about astrology, because they're going to tell you exactly how it's going to impact you.
Is that how it works too when people do like new moon rituals or like the moon phases? It's like you come in and bring some sort of intention? Because what I keep going back to is like I just can't get on the train of like thinking that like I'm just kind of, I don't want to call it brainwashed, but I'm thinking about the people that I just feel like let astrology like take over their lives and like say everything that's happening in their lives,
Opposite end
because
of
I feel like that's
spectrums.
surrendering too much control to something, like with anything. But like for new moon rituals, is that what people are doing? Like I don't even know what that means. Is it like you bring a certain intention based on the different phase of the moon?
So the phases of the moon, first of all, are not super tied into astrology. I want to say, but don't quote me here, that they were kind of adopted into astrology, because it doesn't matter whether the moon has more light on its surface or less light on its surface, a la full moon or new moon. It's still going to have that specific degree of the zodiac sign that it's in, and you're still going to get those energies. Now, there's a school of thought, and I particularly subscribe to this as well, is that the moon controls our emotions, right? So when the moon is new, it's said to set intentions to start something new. And generally things that you can start on a new moon, and I've done this a few times, you're going to find that you're able to carry through. Like, for example, breaking a coffee addiction. I recently did that, and I used the new moon to carry me out through the full moon to break my coffee addiction. And it's a really good way to do intention setting. And then when the full moon happens, it's a culmination of all the energies and kind of a completion cycle. And then when it goes from full back to new, it's kind of like a releasing, reflecting, and processing what you want to do next. And where astrology kind of comes into that is when you know what sign the moon is going to be new and full in, you can set your intentions around topics that reflect the energy that the zodiac is giving the moon at that same time. So you get like extra power to like, and I don't want to say power because it sounds cheesy, but you get like extra kind of like intention that comes out of that, and better results that come out of that.
Yeah, it's like using this stuff as tools as opposed to it controlling you.
Exactly.
I really keep coming back to that thought. It's so powerful. So
And I just want to say, like, if you want to start something new, don't wait for the phases of the moon. Like, if you have a really good idea and you want to start, just start it. But if you happen to have some options to, like, figure stuff out on new moon versus full moon, etc., take it into consideration, see what happens.
well,
Sorry,
yeah,
what were you
like
saying?
when we talked about, I think this stuff is cool. It's cool little coincidences. Like when I was breaking my third day of my first fast with you, and it was on the night of the full moon
It was
or the new
perfect.
moon. Was it full?
Yeah.
I forget if it was full or new, but it was one of the
Yeah.
it was one of the profound phases of the moon.
Yeah.
One of them, but it was cool because I was like, wow, like
It was a full.
I'm breaking, it was a full.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm breaking this fast. This was a new process for me. This is the full moon. Like it was a cool little alignment that I was like, I'm going to roll with this. Like this is going to be a new phase for me. And because I saw that, I took that intention that I made myself and carried it forward, and it was useful,
Yep.
for me. So, this stuff can be so useful. So,
another pro tip, by the way, on that fasting note, I've noticed that it's much easier. Like I fast intermittently, and also like for a few days here and there, just to like do body composition, like lose a few pounds here and there. You can lose weight so much easier when you're fasting on a waning moon, which is when the moon is actually getting less and less bright. It's going back to a new moon. And because that's like a time of the moon that's shedding. And when the moon is getting brighter, it's a time of gaining. So if you actually time like diets, you don't have to fast, like you'll actually find that you lose more weight on the second half of the when the full moon is over, going back to new. Yeah.
Oh, Mom, if you're listening,
there
you go.
There you go.
Cool. Wow, that's really interesting. So, yeah, God, there's so many questions. Like, so the moon, wow. I'm just like, my mind is blown. There's like so much to digest here. I don't want to like keep changing gears, but there's like so many more things I want to talk about.
The moon is really
Specifically
important.
the Saturn return. So I used to know this girl who told me about my Saturn return. She's like, your Saturn return's coming up. And I was like, oh my God, what is that? What's my Saturn return? What is that? And I think I'm like actually kind of balls deep in it. I want to say it started, I think I'm in it right now. It was supposed to be early 2019, if I remember correctly. I may not be in it yet, but I'm like leading up to it. And I'm like getting all juice because I'm like, I just started this podcast and oh my gosh, this like new transition in my life. So what I know of it is that it's like a transitionary period. But that's all I know. So if you can maybe explain more than that.
Yeah, sure. So before I jump into Saturn, let me just explain what a return is. So your birthday on Earth is technically a solar return. We call it a birthday because from the perspective of the Earth, the sun went all the way around and came back to where it started. That's your birthday. We have a day for Saturn as well. it's your Saturn day, let's say. So it's the place in the sky where Saturn was at when you were born. It came all the way back. Now Saturn is really far away from the sun, so it takes about 28 years, give or take some change, for it to come back to its starting position. So you're either 28 or you're coming up on 28 is what I'm trying to say here. And it happens every 28 years. So after that, what is that, like 56, and after that, etc. So what Saturn rules, so in order to understand a Saturn return, is Saturn rules time, it rules responsibilities, and it's kind of like that granddad that you had that was like really strict, and he was strict for a good reason because he was teaching how to be a better person. And Saturn kind of gets a bad reputation for wrecking people's lives, because when Saturn comes back to its return position where it was when you were born, it'll make you reevaluate everything that's going on. So like you might find that your relationship, like not saying this relationship, but let's say like for me, I had a bad relationship that I realized I had to get out of during my Saturn return. I started taking my health more seriously. Like I actually went and got physicals. Like I started taking better care of my money. Like I was just wasting money like no other. And at first it hurts a little bit, you know, events could happen to you. Like my house had a like a severe leak that I had to deal with, and all these different things were happening in my life at that time. But you become better for it. Like my health has never been better. I'm no longer in a toxic relationship. All these things have changed, and while you're in the Saturn return, you're like, oh my God, everything's going down. Everything's on fire. What the hell is going on with my life? And it's really Saturn just recorrecting all that stuff. And now I say that as an example of what could happen to anybody going through a Saturn return, but it doesn't mean that all that stuff's going to happen. Saturn is a check to see if you got your shit in order. And if you don't have your shit in order, Saturn's going to come through like a wrecking ball and break everything down so you can make things right. And so the reason why I think it's important for people to know what a Saturn return is because that period in your life when you're feeling like your confidence is really low and nothing's going your way, it will pass. And the thing that's really beautiful about Saturn lets you keep everything you learn from it. So all the new benefits that you have, like your health, everything, like you get to take with you, and you're so much better off for it. So it's just being prepared for that there's going to be some trying times. That's all.
Wow. Thanks, Saturn. It's
Yep.
like pretty cool. So do you know why Saturn was chosen? Is it because you said it was kind of the planet that represented like time and all that, or is there another significance to it why it was chosen? Like, do we have like a Jupiter return or like a Uranus return?
Yep, we have all of those. They're less pronounced in the effect on your life because it's like everyone only talks about Mercury retrograde because it happens so often and the communication breaks down in contracts and everyone thinks everything's going to hell during that time. That's not really a return, but it's a common occurrence or something significant enough for us to notice. Saturn, on the other hand, is also very significant for us to notice, and it happens kind of like clockwork. In fact, if you've ever heard of the 27 Club, so to speak, it's where a lot of celebrities and famous people, they mysteriously die or they kill themselves or whatever by the age of 27, or they get murdered, whatever. That's like right before a Saturn return happens. It's very... I don't know what to take of that. It's just very ominous timing that happens. But we do have a return for everything. And the reason why Saturn is the one for return is because, like I mentioned, each planet rules something in your chart. And so we only talked about the sun, moon, and rising. So sun, your actions, moon, your feelings and emotions, and your rising sign, kind of your personality, your spirit. Mercury rules intellect and communication. Venus rules your appreciations, your values, and your love. Mars rules your aggression and kind of like your energy and your go do it type stuff. I'm kind of losing a word here. And then Jupiter is about your expansion and your faith. Saturn is about responsibilities, time, taking care of your shit. And then after that, you have Uranus, which is going to be unconventional ways of doing things, unique ways of doing things. Neptune is going to be dreams, illusions, making reality your own, magic, so to speak. And Pluto, which astrologers still do count, even though it was declassified as a planet, that's a science declassification, by the way, is...
Why was it declassified?
Because there's a lot of other dwarf planets out there that are similar in size to Pluto, like a handful of them out there. And some astrologers actually do count it, but I haven't really looked into a whole lot of that. There's just too many of them out there. But Pluto has kind of rules the underworld, so to speak, and deep transformation. And then there's
why I always loved Pluto so much. I
Yeah.
loved Pluto, man. I loved Pluto because it was like the peculiar, cold little planet on the end. And I was like, I just loved it. And I'm sad now that it was declassified, but it makes total sense that I loved it because you said it like ruled the underworld. And that, like, you know, it just makes sense with my personality that I would just like that deep, dark shit.
You know what's funny? Pluto is ruled by Scorpio, and you're Scorpio. So, of course, Scorpio would say that.
Hell yes. And you know what I realized too? I still say Uranus. I like Uranus better than Uranus because
Yeah.
it sounds like you're saying Uranus. I'm like a 8-year-old right now.
I can get behind that.
Yes. But so the Saturn return sounds like you said, it's not necessarily, it depends on where you're at in your life, right? Like if you've already kind of been on a path of like figuring your shit out and you're going in the right direction, it's not going to stir your shit up that much. But
Not that much.
if you are on a path and you need some course correction, it's going to come in like a wrecking ball and fuck your shit up.
Yeah, and you may not even know that you need a course correction. You could think that you're doing things right. Like I've been in that stage. Like I thought I had everything figured out, and it's like Saturn's like, nope, you don't have anything figured out. Let me break all this down, and you're going to suffer a little bit, but you're going to get it right this time. And so it can be a little bit of a surprise. But if you've been doing a lot of inner work and you've been taking care of your health and your responsibilities and your relationships and everything, it's really not going to affect you that much, but you are going to pick up some lessons from that.
Well, it's interesting because I need to figure out the exact timing of my Saturn return. I don't know if it's now or if I'm going up to it or maybe I'm in it right now. But I mean, the past year, especially the past couple of years, but the past like 6 months to a year, I've been like overhauling my life of just like everything, like narrowing down diet, addictions, like social media, relationships, like really honing in on every single thing that I need to do, doing that inner work, like really, really trying. And so, I mean, it coincides with I just turned 28. I turned 28 in November, 11/11.
There you go.
And you know, I'm in it. So I'm gonna look up my dates. You wrote on here, why is so I'm supposed to, or I want to ask you, why is the North Node important? Or what is the North Node and why is it important?
So the North Node is with respect to the moon, and it's not your moon sign. It's kind of like if you think of North Pole and South Pole, the moon has a North Pole and South Pole. And kind of where that North Node is pointing towards, and it moves very slowly, is called the North Node. We don't call it Moon North Node because we don't track any other North Nodes. It's just the North Node. And the North Node is really important for learning what your purpose is in this lifetime. It is the most powerful thing you can learn about yourself. Besides the actual placements, you know, and understanding yourself, learning your purpose is going to come from the North Node. So the North Node also has a South Node. So these go kind of hand in hand. So the South Node is going to be what you're comfortable with, what you're natural at. And the North Node is what you're uncomfortable at, but will provide immense growth in your life. And so South Node is kind of like a typecasting for an actor. So Arnold Schwarzenegger, a South Node, behaving like your South Node is being like Arnold Schwarzenegger, always doing action films with shooting and blowing stuff up and riding a motorcycle and doing all that bad guy macho stuff. North Node is being Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I don't know what kind of movie he's done besides that genre. There's got to be a couple where he plays something in a rom-com, you know, and
like
it's
Jingle
not
All the Way, kind of.
Jingle All the Way. There you go.
Yay!
Totally. That's behaving in your North Node, and it's not necessarily like the best example because even Arnold himself doesn't think he's like the best actor. He's wrote it in his autobiography, but you know, doing things that make you uncomfortable, that take you out of your typecasting, that actually make you work for it to try to learn something, provide a lot of expansion in your life and a lot of growth in your life. So, for example, my South Node is in Libra. So Libra is the sign of kind of like relationships and helping other people out. It's also kind of like, it can be seen as like a supporting role. And the opposite of Libra is going to be my North Node. And that's kind of like, they say that's what your past life was, and your North Node is what you're supposed to be in this life. So my North Node is in Aries. So I'm supposed to be less of that relating to others, less of trying to support others, and just go do my own shit and just kind of be a little bit more selfish about it in life. And it doesn't have to sound that bad. It just means I need to be more spontaneous. Aries is a very spontaneous sign. And I've seen a lot of benefits in my life just trying new shit all the time. And I even told you on the last podcast, it's like, I always try something once, and I always try to do things that make me uncomfortable because you just have to get out there and do it. And it provides a lot of growth and expansion and learning for myself. And so it's important for when you look up your chart to look up where your North Node is, because you're going to find you need to start behaving like that. And you'll not, I don't want to say need, but when you choose to start behaving like your North Node sign, you're going to find that your life feels richer. It's going to feel more expansive. It's going to feel like you're starting to feel like you understand your purpose here. Not necessarily like the whole like origin of the cosmos type purpose, but you're going to start to understand like what makes you tick and what makes you grow as a person.
So with the Arnold Schwarzenegger example, I was envisioning it more of like you have your central purpose, which would be like, I mean, I don't want to use a profession as a purpose, but let's just say like acting. And then you have the two nodes, the opposites of that. So like, let's just take me, for example. Let's just say making videos or communicating. For me, something that's more comfortable is conversation style. Something that's more of a stretch for me would be more of like a reporting style where it's just one-ended, or like just making a video myself. Like that's a very basic, probably irrelevant example, but we'll just take it. I was envisioning it like that, but is it more of like different behaviors in different parts? Because then you use the example of you with like relationships versus the other, like versus like the opposite of that. So like I'm trying to figure out, are these like is it your life purpose and then you have the opposites of your life purpose, like you're on opposite ends of that spectrum, or is it like two completely different unrelated categories, the North and the South Node?
No, they're completely related. So the South Node is what you naturally do when you're not pushing yourself, when you're not expanding yourself, when you're not trying to do new things. Like it's like your default. It's kind of like if you just stayed at home all day on the couch, like for example, and watch TV. Like, yeah, it doesn't take a lot of energy. You might be good at that, but the real world is outside. So getting out to the outside and experiencing the real world causes you to put on some shoes, some clothes, take a shower, go make some plans, figure out where you're going to go. And it requires more effort. And so the South Node is kind of like where you came from and what you're good at and comfortable at. And your North Node is where you need to be going and things that make you uncomfortable. So more often than not, when you look at your astro chart, your natal chart, excuse me, you're going to find that your North Node, when you read it, you're like, oh, I'm like totally not like that. Like, I don't know about that. I don't know that I can actually do that. And it forces you to step out of your comfort zone. And really all it is a compass for providing growth. So just trying to watch out for your North Node and see where the growths are, where the growth opportunities are.
So this could be like somebody that's very extroverted, for example, that always wants to go out and always wants to be around people and always wants to go to concerts and clubs and around noise. That would be their South Node. And then their North Node would be like at home meditating and like diving within and being in the quiet.
Yeah, that could very well be the case for that person. Yeah. There's other factors involved, like with the other planets. Maybe they have a predisposition to do that, but let's say that their natural was to do all that stuff, and they should be really doing inner work and meditating and building more solid relationships rather than just going out and partying all the time.
So then, okay. So then when you look at your South Node, it's really what you're, like you said, what your default is. So it's like when no one's watching, when there's no pressure on you, like what are you doing?
And it provides no growth. So it's kind of like stagnation. Like you can do it. It's fine. Arnold can keep playing action movies where stuff blows up in the background, but does that make him a better actor? No, it doesn't make him a better actor. He's got to do different roles.
So one more question on this, just so I can fully understand. So I'm trying to envision these nodes. Are these actions? Are these traits? Are these like professions, all of the above? Does it depend? I'm trying to like visualize, because we've been using a bunch of different examples that kind of have different things.
So it's an embodiment of kind of the energy that you want to bring to life. However, and we didn't really talk about this, and I don't want to talk about this here because it's a more advanced topic. There's the concept called houses, and they have very similar energy to the actual zodiac signs, but the houses tell you what area of life is specifically impacted. So the houses are determined by your rising sign. This is why it is so critical to know the time of birth that you have and the location that you were born at, because the rising sign determines the rest of the houses. Your rising sign basically becomes your first house. So it kind of offsets everything. And so your North Node will fall into a specific house. So your North Node, I don't remember what your North Node is, but like, let's say like my North Node is in Aries, and I think it's in the 12th house, if I remember correctly. So for me, I have to be more spontaneous and take more action and relate less to people and just kind of just do stuff without asking questions, you know. In the 12th house, which rules kind kind of mystery and death and the occult, and not necessarily occult, but let's say like more mystical experiences, meditating, going to spiritual retreats, stuff like that. So it's asking me to be more spontaneous in that direction. So wherever your house wherever your north node is placed in whatever house it is in, is going to tell you what area of life you need to apply that strategy to.
Damn. Well, that just kind of went over my head a little bit,
Yeah,
but I appreciate you trying to explain it to me. And I can't say that I can visualize like really the houses and what they mean, but I get it in the way that you described it. So thank you. Thank you for attempting, but I still don't really fully understand. The one more thing, and then I kind of want to go into how we are going to close the conversation about astrology. Days of the weeks reflecting planets.
What does that mean? This is really cool. So I just like to mention this. It's a little bit fun here. We don't realize how much the cosmos actually affects our calendar system. So you can look this up. This is a complete fact. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They all represent these 7 planets that were visible with the naked eye before we had telescopes to see Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And so Monday is Moon Day. And like I said, planets was a loose term. It didn't actually mean the moon was a planet. Monday is Moon Day. Tuesday is Mars Day. Wednesday is Mercury Day. Thursday is Jupiter Day. Friday is Venus Day. Saturday is Saturn Day, and Sunday is Sunday. And what's interesting is when you learn the qualities of these planets, and this is something that I've recently started getting into.
Wait, what do you mean by Sunday is Sunday? There's no planet?
So the sun is technically a planet in astrology.
Sunday.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. I was like, wait a second. I don't know if that was supposed to like trick me or something. Okay, cool. No. Go on.
Yeah. Yeah. So each planet, like I kind of briefly went through, has a different purpose on how it affects you. And so these are entire days of the week that are ruled by that. So today is Thursday. So today is technically ruled by Jupiter. And it's just a little fun thing. So Jupiter is all about expansion and wisdom and having these far out conversations like we are having right now, considering other perspectives, philosophy, long distance travel, stuff like that. And you'll find there's themes to these days if you start to observe it a little bit. And I thought that was really cool. And one other thing that's really interesting observation. So Monday is Moon Day. So Moon Day is supposed to be a restful day where you're kind of diving into your inner world, because moon rules the inner world, your emotions and how you feel about things. It's no wonder people hate going to work on Monday. Like, this is just my personal theory on it. Because that day's qualities, the moon is not structured for work. It's for experiencing things, versus like Saturday, which happens to be a weekend day, is all about, responsibilities and time and structure and making sure you have your shit together. Where Saturday could be used as a day to pump out work. And I remember even being like back in college several years ago, it's like I got the most studying and prep for tests and everything done on Saturdays, even though I could have studied during the week. And it kind of makes you question, like, what did Saturn have anything to do with this? But the reason why this is relevant is because the collective unconsciousness is calling out these days of the week without realizing that they're actually calling out names of planets here. So it's just a little interesting, fun note that you can think about as you go through your week.
Wow. I had no idea.
Yeah. Look it up. It's real.
So scientists would love us right now?
Yeah, I guess so. They'd be like, all right, you win based on nomenclature.
I know. Well, that's a good transition. I want to talk about precession. So like I said, I watched, I prepare for these episodes and I watched a good amount of videos. I think I sent you most of them that I watched. I watched a couple other ones. I lost interest because it was just like some old guy talking in monotone voice. I'm like, I just can't do this. But I watched a good amount of videos. And what was really interesting is that you have one video, the one with the chick that was like, this is not true. About all the points, right? I think I even wrote it down. She was like, astrology is not scientific because it's not based on evidence. Conclusions are not testable, not open to review by other scientists, and it's unfalsifiable, so it can't be proven wrong. She was just on her point of trying to prove it wrong. And the one thing that she talked about was precession, where I think I wrote it down. So she defined it as the sun is no longer in the given zodiac constellation, and it's based on an outdated model And it's based on precession, which is a phenomenon when the Earth wobbles on the axis every 25,800 cycles. So the signs that we know are wrong. That was like, I guess, according to you, even one of the biggest kind of debates in astrology of like why, like this whole precession thing. So what is it about precession? Like, what is precession even? I don't even really understand what the heck it means for the Earth to be wobbling. Like, the fuck? I don't know what that means. And then what does that have to do with this debate?
So let's start with precession. So I don't know what those spinners are, not the fidget spinners, but back in the day, there are these wooden spinners and you'd spin and they kind of like go on your tabletop. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, they have the little point on the bottom, right?
Yes.
And then you would just, oh yeah.
In Inception, that was Leonardo DiCaprio's whatever you called it, totem or something. You remember it was spinning at the end? Spoiler alert, I just spoiled it.
What movie? I don't think I've ever
Inception.
seen it.
Remember?
No,
where you're like dreaming in a dream in a dream.
I've never seen it.
Oh man, you got to watch it. Wow.
Inception?
Or was it Inception?
I don't know.
Inception. Yeah.
Inception. Okay. I've never seen it. So I'll look
it's
into
up there. It's up there. You might get a comment down below like, you haven't seen it. Watch. But anyways, so those little spinners, right? So you spin it on a tabletop. And in the beginning, it's like spinning perfectly and it's kind of moving back and forth. But as the spin is kind of slowing down, I'm not saying this is happening in the Earth. It'll like start to like wobble like this a little bit, right?
Okay.
But it's still spinning, but it's like wobbling. And the Earth does a very slow wobble around its axis. So the Earth's axis is kind of like at an angle and like it's spinning like normally every day. It just keeps spinning around, but it like, if it like starts to wiggle a little bit like this. So what precession does is it's wiggling in one direction.
I see. So it's not like this. It's going. It's spinning, but then it's kind of spinning. I get it.
It basically causes like the North Pole to point at a different area in the sky, and that's an argument against astrology. And it also divides two classes of astrology, because back when astrology was invented around 5,000, 4,000 years ago, the zodiac signs and everything were matched up with the seasons perfectly. The constellations were exactly in the same spot as the zodiac. But as precession happened over thousands of years, it has shifted. I don't remember how many degrees, like by 15 or 20 degrees, like around that range, all the signs over into the next sign, looking at the constellations. Now, Western astrology, hang in there. I know this is a little complex. Western astrology basically says, no, actually, astrology was meant to be based on the seasons and the way that we perceive the original area of the sky. The area of the sky's energies rather than the actual constellation that is there now. Whereas Eastern astrology, or like sidereal, says, no, actually, we're going to change our calendar to move with the stars with precession. So because there's two kind of camps of astrology, Western and Eastern, that have different systems, it causes a big scrutiny point for Western astrology, right? Because a lot of people will say, well, the stars aren't in the exact spot that they used to be back then. But the thing that's really curious, and a lot of professional astrologers still are kind of on the fence about this, is the Western astrology actually tends to resonate a lot more. It's been fixed a little bit more for the seasons. And I know personally, having met people that have practiced Eastern astrology, they're like, oh, I'm this sign. I'm like, I totally can't see it. Like, and a lot of astrologers will tell you the same, like, I don't see that Eastern sign. So it's kind of like,
so the Eastern astrology, they're moving their calendar, you said, or they're moving. So basically they're adjusting with precession.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then Western is as is. So it's keeping.
I don't, yeah, kind of as is.
That?
It doesn't adjust for precession. So it means that the area of stars that, let's say, Leo used to be in, right, 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, is Leo's not actually there, the physical constellation. It's shifted by about 15, 20 degrees, just a minor shift. And that minor shift is enough to put you into the adjacent zodiac sign. So Western astrology says, no, actually, this has to be more relatable to the seasons. And the model that Western astrology is that energy in the sky with relation to the seasons is a zodiac sign, even though the constellation doesn't match up perfectly to it.
I see. So basically, Leo, let's just say hundreds of thousands of years ago or whatever, Leo was in the Leo space in the sky. And that's how the space in the sky for Leo was designated Leo. But
Correct.
now the actual constellation for Leo may not be in that Leo space anymore. So then the critique on that is like, because precession is going on, it's not consistent with what it used to be. So you're not actually a Leo, but you would be defined as a Leo based on the space in the sky, not the constellation. So you would still technically be a Leo, but the critique is that the constellation is no longer in the space.
Wow, you got that expertly. Took me a while to digest it myself the first time I heard it. It's like the pizza example, right? When
Got
you
to
look
bring
at
up
12
pizza for me.
slices,
That's how
you
you
got to
do
tie
it.
it in, you know? It's like the pizza example, right? We're still at the center of the pizza. There's still 12 slices, but the crust is like moving. And so the crust would be like the stars. But that slice of pizza coming from the center is still that zodiac sign. It's never going to change. It's just the stars that were in the background that determine that sign to begin with have shifted a little bit, but it doesn't change the fact that the inner pizza is moving.
That makes sense. I mean, I can see the critique, but then I can see the explanation behind the critique too.
Yep.
You know, because it depends on what you're using to define to define it. Because to me, how you described it, you're using the piece of the pie in the sky, I like that, to define your zodiac. Right. That's what we're using. We're not actually using the constellation. It doesn't seem like that's the definition anymore. And the piece of the pie in the sky was determined by our ancestors years ago, you know, thousands and thousands of years ago. And that's what we use to move forward. So it's almost like we can envision it like the constellation was used initially at first, but now times have changed. We're still going to use the initial spot of the constellation, not the constellation itself.
Correct. Yeah. So zodiac signs are constellations, but constellations are not zodiac signs. That's kind of how it works. Constellation is the actual physical stars in the sky, and the zodiac is the energy or sign that it represents.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And
wow,
what I do want to point out about that system can, if you're hearing this, it definitely is a skeptical point, and I totally get it. And it's something that I battle with, and a lot of astrologers do. Start looking into everything I've explained here, like the elements and all that, and all the signs. Try to recognize things in your environment. You'll start to see that the energies make sense regardless of the system you choose. The system just says what the starting point is for each sign. That's all it changes, but everything else is agreed upon. The signs themselves, the energies that they carry, the elements that they are, etc. All of that is still the same, but it is a contention point that scientists bring up, and I'm glad we brought it up because I just want to give it to you guys real. Like, let's look at both angles, like the criticism and the support for it.
Well, yeah, and to just briefly talk about it before we close, it's like I watched I watched these videos on astrology, and there's some studies that are done that apparently disprove it, and then there are some studies that are done, like I'm looking at right here, like Carl Jung, he got the astrology charts from 483 couples.
That was a good one.
Yeah, and he found that out of 936 out of 966 charts had large proportions of Sun, Moon, Venus, and Mars, which astrologists say indicate marriage and romantic relationships. And he was even stunned by these results, right? So then he contacted his mathematician friend, and his friend calculated that this could happen by chance 10 million to 1.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, I mean, that's amazing. And it's like he went into the experiment trying to disprove astrology, and he repeated it 3 different times. So there's that experiment. And then there's, oh my gosh, Mikhail Gokumin, I think it is, statistician and psychologist, who was actually, his introduction to astrology was very bitter, and he basically made it his mission in this phase of his life to disprove it. And he was looking more into vocational astrology. So that's whether the planets can determine, you know, what your career path is. And he studied the birth charts of over 20,000 famous people. The birth charts ended up matching the personality of the person he was studying. And it was so significant that they calculated the possibility of it happening by chance was 5 million to 1. So it's like there's even groups that furthermore try to debunk this. And he's because he was so much of a skeptic, he was excited that these groups were trying to debunk his own like study and his own findings that he just found. And there was this Belgian group, I guess, that tried to successfully replicate it. And they withheld their results for 8 years because they were so embarrassed because they were able to replicate it, but they were trying to not replicate it. And then there was another group that initially announced they couldn't replicate his results, but then you know, it was soon disproven. And then members from that organization came out and said, you know, this was actually a scandal. It became one of the biggest, like, you know, corporation scandals of that company because they were hiding these results because they actually found the same result as Mikhail Gokumen. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but it's like there's all these things out there that aren't talked about because I think, like we were talking about in our other podcast, the spiritual community, there are people that just like make it shitty for the people that are doing it right, because you have these like people that are out there that speak in certain ways that even me, I'm like, I don't want, like the people that approach me that are like, oh my God, Mercury's in retrograde. And I'm just like, oh, I can't even do it. But there's actual studies that are done. And I'm sure, oddly enough, like we said, there's like other peer-reviewed studies done in the opposite direction that don't find any correlation. And then I always go back to like, what is true? You can like never tell these days. And that's where it comes into tapping inside your own intuition, what feels right to you, what makes sense to you, questioning everything. But as we kind of transition to closing this, I wanted to end with how you feel astrology can benefit people listening. So you kind of touched upon 3 different parts of this, but I'll let you take it away.
Sure. So the first one is knowing about yourself. So really knowing how you are like and having it described to you. So getting a natal chart reading, which you can get for free, a basic one, and we'll provide some links. We'll tell you where all your planets are and what that actually means to you. And it's a lot to read. It's a lot to digest, but you'll find that some of that makes sense. And that's kind of an intro thing. The next step, if you're more interested in that, on that first note, is go get a professional reading, pay some money for it, go see an expert, sit down with them, get your accurate birth time, have them run your chart and explain things to you. And you'll learn a lot about yourself. The next one is something that I use every single day now for the last 3 years or so since I started observing it, is knowing the energetic climate of the day. Because I know my natal chart or my birth chart, and because I know what the planets are going to be in today, tomorrow, etc., I know how to plan my week. I know what my actual work day looks like, and it is so creepy. When there's placements that don't really gel with my placements, I know it's going to be a rough day at work. And the amount of roughness that it's going to be depends on the signs that are in that placement that don't agree with what I have. And so it kind of like mentally prepares you. And like, I know that if there's a lot of heavy water, I don't have a lot of water in my chart, like very dry. I have a lot of air a lot of fire, air, and earth. I know if there's a ton of water, like, dude, like nothing's going to make any freaking sense that day. Like, I don't know how I'm going to get any work done. People are going to be overly emotional, stuff like that. Like you can start to get get a sense, like an actual weather forecast of the planets and the stars rather than the actual weather of rain and sun. And you don't have to go as far as to knowing like every single detail, but if you study your sun, moon, and rising sign, the 3 signs we talked about, and you look at what the sun and moon are going to be in, the sun only changes every 30 days, so that one's easy to remember. The moon changes every 2.5 days. And there's an app called DAF Moon that I really like, DAFF Moon. We can probably provide a link. It'll tell you what sign the moon is going to be in. And so when you look at it, all you do is draw a relationship from where your moon is to the moon of the day, and where your sun is to the sun of the day, and any other aspects that you're willing to go deeper into. And it tells you how your day is going to go by. And it's like, it's the thing that blows me away, and it constantly keeps me studying and reading up and learning more about astrology and even talking about it, because it's something that like we have this tool to our advantage, like use it. And you know what, like if you're kind of skeptical on the fence, just try it out. And if it doesn't work for you, I totally get it and respect it. But it's knowing how
to interject, to ask a quick question, clarifying question. So how much of that is, are you sometimes looking back in hindsight and being like, wow, I analyzed this day and this is exactly how it went? Or are you always looking forward? Because there's the issue when we're always looking forward, like I was talking about earlier, that you're like manifesting. When you know that something's going to happen, you're creating it because you know. So some of the observations that you've made, have you looked in hindsight too and been like, whoa, that's exactly what happened for that day?
So I don't look in hindsight anymore, but the reason why I started was because I was like, wow, that was a terrible day. Let me go pull up the chart for that day and see what happened. And I was like, oh man, this was aspecting my moon this way, and this Mercury was so not agreeing with my Mercury at that time. And that's when I was like, okay, like let me try to forecast what's going to happen. So, and by the way, when you do a forecast, it doesn't mean that what you're seeing in that forecast is going to happen 100%. There's a tendency or an inclination. It's kind of like gene expression. Like if you ever got like a 23andMe or something back in the day when they told you like what diseases you were susceptible to, if you had a higher chance of diabetes, it didn't mean you were going to get diabetes. It just meant that you had a higher chance of it based on your gene expression. So that's kind of like how you have to look at it. It's kind of like a weather forecast, like for water and snow and everything. Like it doesn't mean it's going to rain if it says it's going to rain that day. There's a high chance of it raining. So that's kind of like how you want to look at it. And there's been plenty of days where, I was like, actually that day was pretty pleasant, and I'll be like, why was that day pleasant? And then I'll look back, I'm like, oh, okay, I can kind of see it. Sometimes I didn't see it, but it's just a really good tool to use for every day.
Cool. All right. So we're talking about knowing yourself, knowing what the energetic climate of the day will be like. And there's a third one. Yeah.
Okay, so this is slightly stalkerish, but anyone who's into astrology will relate so deep with me on this. So when you figure out what other people's natal chart is, it's simple. All you have to do is get their birthday and try to figure out how old they are, and then subtract and find the math of when they were born, and you punch in their stuff into a chart.
Yeah, so simple.
So, well, yeah, there's calculators out there. You just have to get the birthday and their age, and you got pretty much everything but the rising sign. You punch it in the chart, like especially people you work with, your boss, important people at your company, whoever like you need to like work with more effectively. If you know what their chart is, especially let's say like just the sun and the moon sign, you'll be able to communicate that with them on a level that they just so get and resonate with you on, and allows you to do more effective work with them. So like, for example, if I'm talking to a Cancer is a very emotional sign. They like to feel the experience that they're going through and experience things in a new way. I know as a Leo, like I can't come in storming in, like kind of like raw, like Leo, like claws out, whatever. I've got to be like, okay, like let me go up to this person. Let me be slow about it. Let me make sure that, they're feeling what I'm feeling, and I actually feel what I'm saying to them rather than just saying hot air, and allow them to get in tune with what I'm saying. And so, it's a way to know how to interact with people better. And it's kind of like a hack. And it does require you looking up people's birth charts. But if you get into astrology, you're going to become obsessed with it. You're going to, like, as soon as you like figure out more of this stuff, you're going to like text all your friends and family members, like, what's your birthday? Give me your time of birth. And just start remembering that stuff. And it's just such a cool tool to be able to interact with people. And then when you start observing how your interactions are with people with those specific placements, you'll start to be able to know what to look for in a partner. And I'm not saying like, if you want to get into a romantic relationship, they've got to check all the boxes, but you're going to know what boxes are going to make a whole lot of sense that are going to make that relationship work. So, yeah, those are kind of like the 3 reasons of why you should look into astrology.
Yeah, it's actually freaky how accurate when I pretty much have read, I've read many different sources. I do not know how reputable the sources are. They probably aren't reputable, honestly, because they were just like found on Google. But what I've read with the detailed analysis of me and my husband, like our individual traits and how we work together, it is unbelievably and like freakishly accurate because he's Cancer and I'm Scorpio. And so apparently it's a very strong, like lifelong, like beyond lifetime bond. That's what I keep seeing. And just the ways that, I'm kind of withdrawn, and like the trust issues with him, and then his emotion, like the way that everything is described, I'm like, literally that's like describing our every single day interaction. So I don't discount that. I mean, it's pretty surreal, because then understanding that after I read that stuff, I read it years ago, I was like, okay, like I have some sort of greater understanding of how we interact now. And then I used that as a tool to move forward in our relationship, like in a way. I mean, it wasn't like a huge tool, but I brought that awareness forward, and it made sense.
Yep, totally. There's a lot of magic there to be uncovered, and all you have to do is look, give it a shot. And I know it's a lot of stuff. It's really overwhelming, but there's a lot of benefits that can be learned there.
Wow. Lots of information, but thank you so much for sharing all of this. I appreciate it. I'm gonna ask you. We'll talk after, but to send me all the links that you referenced, or whatever links you want people to follow. Mainly for, I think people are probably curious to look up their charts. I'm curious myself. I think you already sent me mine. I have to like dive deep into it. But yeah, well, people, you've already been on, so people know where to find you, but I'm going to put all your stuff anyway. We'll put the links, and if anybody has any questions, they can reach out to me, or maybe even reach out to you, and we'll talk. But Shoot, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate your time again, and we'll figure out something else to talk about on if maybe we'll get into like astrology episode 2. Like next time, like we have the solid foundation, right? Maybe like in a couple months, it's like, okay, now we can talk about what are the houses, whatever you're talking about.
Oh man. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And I was telling you just right before this, it takes like 2 full days on a weekend to learn astrology. Like I see those classes all the time. So if you kept up with us this whole time, like you're doing really, really good. And it means I did a decent job explaining it. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Matt. And I'm gonna stop the broadcast, but you and I will keep chatting in 3. I'm gonna be like Joe Rogan. 3, 2, and 1.